According to the CDC, 1 in 8 women in the U.S. will develop breast cancer at some stage in their life. They will get breast cancer. And over 40,000 women in the U.S. will die this year alone from breast cancer. Worldwide, osteoporosis affects over 200 million people. And that equates to 1 fracture every 3 seconds. Now, when I see the word breast cancer and I'm doing research, I always go back to a memory when I was a child. And when I was a little kid, maybe around like 5, we used to always do these summer vacations out on the San Juan Islands, go boating, fishing, and we would go with about 3 different family friends of ours. And it was literally the highlight of my summer each and every year. Every single year I looked forward to this. And then all of a sudden, one of the families, the mom got breast cancer. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it instantly changed the mood, the vibe of the whole vacation instantly. So where I was once so excited, I kind of dreaded going to this thing because the energy just wasn't there. Everyone was sad all the time. And because this was like a 5 to 8 year process going on. She would go through remission, it would come back again, remission, breast, mastectomy, everything. And then, she would even have to get these like airlifted to go to the hospital, routine rounds while we're on vacation to get a mammogram, to get a follow-up mammogram, to get her dose of chemotherapy. Then she would try to, just for her kids' sake, to come back on vacation and just try to present herself in good spirits. And we know that was just really difficult for her. And so seeing how the kids reacted to that and seeing how sad they were, it began to instill a huge fear in myself because I thought maybe my mom was going to die of breast cancer. And I'm thinking this and it literally just wasn't a very fun time anymore. And so that was then, and just last week I find out that a mom from the other family, we only went with 3 families. So I just found out that a mom from another different family just died of breast cancer. So that's 2 out of the 3 families we went on vacation with had breast cancer alone. And that was pretty significant for me. Now, what I want to do tonight is I want to talk about women's health, and specifically, I want to talk about breast cancer and osteoporosis. And what you're going to learn tonight is that the U.S. healthcare system, it's set up to produce profits. It's not set up to produce results, and that's a fact. And in fact, you'll find out that, osteoporosis and breast cancer are really just devastating, to say the least. Now, the U.S. healthcare system loves this word prevention. You even go to the Medicare website and it says, a list of preventative services includes, and it says things like diabetes screenings, mammograms, DEXA scans, and the list goes on. But if you look at the dictionary on what prevention means, it means to keep from occurring. So let's say we do a diabetes screening test and they diagnose me with diabetes. Or I do a mammogram and they diagnose me with breast cancer. Or better yet, I do a DEXA scan that measures bone density and they diagnose me with osteoporosis. If I already have the illness, can I prevent anything? How are these preventative services? Or is really what they're doing early detection? So let's look more deep into this. On the Medicare, section 2251.3, the little statute in their notes, it says this. It says, care that seeks to prevent disease, promote health, and prolong and enhance the quality of life is not considered medically necessary. So they just said that they don't prevent anything and they don't cover anything, but then on the front page of their website it says a list of preventative services include. So a little kind of hard to understand going on here. So we know that their business is not in prevention, it's in early detection, for the purpose of getting on treatment sooner, drugs or surgery. And so here's the thing. The question I want to ask you guys is, if you detect something early and I get treated for it earlier in life, why be healthier later on in life? Because if that is true, early detection is actually not a bad strategy, to be honest. So let's look at the facts. According to the CRS report of Congress, they looked at the early detection statistics and they said that all it really does is it makes sick people become customers sooner. In fact, it goes on to say that prescribing drugs to more people at earlier points in their lives, in earlier states of disease, has not resulted in less sickness or spending later on. So there you go, right there. We know that they only do early detection and that it does not make people healthy at all. In fact, it makes them really sick. And then here's just an example. Say that I do a DEXA scan, they diagnose me with osteoporosis, and I'm taking these bone building drugs. Can I just take these bone building drugs for 2 weeks, for a month, and then be like, hey, I'm cured, I'm done? No, you're a customer for life. And it's not a better, longer life that they lead you to believe. So when we're talking about these preventative tests that our US healthcare system promotes, we gotta look at mammograms and DEXA scans. You see, females, right when they get to the age about 50, they start getting these reminder cards every year to get your annual mammogram and DEXA scan. And what studies show is that more than half of these tests are completely unnecessary and the consequences are detrimental. So let's first take a look at DEXA scans. Now, the DEXA scans are one of the most useless machines I've ever seen. Different brands can cause the results to change by more than 20%. And that's more than enough to accidentally diagnose you with osteoporosis. And in fact, the clothes you wear or the shadows your bone makes can actually throw the machine completely off. So there you go. And what's interesting is that the AARP, which is like the retired group, they actually recommended all women to not do any DEXA scans until they're over the age of 65. But you know, our system, they're starting bright and early at 50, in some cases earlier. So here's what studies show. More than half of the women getting DEXA scans do not need them. And there's a reason for this. All of these DEXA scans that are given to women, it's part of this greed-fueled plot by one of the biggest drug companies in the world, and that's Merck. So I gotta take you on a little 20-year history here. What happened is that 20 years ago, in 1995, Merck developed Fosamax. And at that time, they couldn't even give this drug away. It was so toxic. But what they found out was the reason why they couldn't sell it is because no doctors had DEXA scans. They were very expensive, and if you couldn't diagnose osteoporosis with a DEXA scan, you couldn't, give them a prescription for Fosamax. So they realized they needed more DEXA scans to sell more Fosamax. So this is what they did. They created a bogus nonprofit organization so they could get Medicare to help the funding, and they distributed DEXA scans to doctors all over the country. 4 years later, in just 4 years, DEXA scans went from 750 to over 10,000 in the US. And millions of women were taking these screening tests, millions of women were getting diagnosed with osteoporosis, and millions of women were put on Fosamax, which is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. So business-wise, I think Merck succeeded in their marketing plan. But now we really got to look into what Fosamax does, because it's one of the most deadliest drugs you can get. You see, Fosamax has the #1 partner in crime, the DEXA scan, for its ability to falsely diagnose you with osteoporosis. So let's look at a normal anatomy of a bone. You have osteoblasts, which is this type of cell that builds new bone, and you have osteoclasts, which breaks down old, brittle, low-quality bone. So you have this constant regeneration process to keep bones healthy. What Fosamax does is it blocks osteoclasts to work. So now you will have more bone because you're not going to be taking away bone anymore. But that bone there is going to be low quality, brittle, just this real crappy bone. Okay, that's what you're left with. So what they found is that instead of having this buildup of crappy bone, this natural regeneration process to keep the bone healthy, now this bone there's increased bone mass. However, there's a lot of microfractures being developed inside these bones because it's so unhealthy. And what they found is that women taking Fosamax were 125 times more likely to get a fracture of the femur, which is supposed to be your strongest bone of the body. So that stat alone just tells us that Fosamax does not give you better bone density. It actually makes your bones far worse. And what's even worse is that women between 65 and 69 who get a hip fracture are 5 times more likely to die than a woman that didn't get a fracture. So what this tells us is that Fosamax literally is killing people by an alarming rate. So to help you explain what Fosamax does, we're going to take a look at a plant analogy. Let's pretend this plant has 2 types of cells. One that builds new leaves and new stems, and then they have one type of cells that eats away the old stems, the old leaves. If you block those cells' ability to stop working, the ones that remove the old leaves and the old stems, what you're going to end up with is this. So indeed, you do have more vegetation, but it does not even resemble the plant as it once was. In fact, it's all old shrubs, old leaves, old everything. And this is exactly what Fosamax does to your bones. You have more bone, but the end result is not what they think it was. So when we're talking about osteoporosis, another hot topic is dairy. And I got some breaking news for everyone in here. Dairy does not increase bone density. I'm sorry. Yeah. In fact, are humans even made to drink milk in the first place? Because I got 3 things to present here. First, we're the only mammalian species. We're the only species that consumes another species' milk. That's number 1. Number 2, we're the only species that consumes milk past infancy. Number 3, we're the only species who gets osteoporosis. So let's just put that in perspective here. And what you find is that the cows that make our dairy, they don't eat grass anymore. They eat grain. So when you substitute grain for grass, which has no omega-3 healthy fats, no calcium, and they eat grain, which actually has no calcium but also blocks your body's ability to use calcium, we have some problems here. And another problem is that cows have 4-chambered stomachs designed to ferment grass. They don't know what to do with grain. So when you give cows grain, it makes them so fat, so unhealthy, that over 90% within 6 weeks get liver tumors. Not to mention they have to get tubes injected in their stomach to release the gas that's caused by trying to digest this grain, this toxic grain going on here. And the next image I'm going to show is a little graphic, so I apologize if anyone is sensitive to this stuff. But these cows get so fast that they can't even stand up anymore. They're so unhealthy. And there's a kind of unwritten law in slaughterhouses that a cow needs to be ambulatory to be able to slaughter it. So they're very clever, right? They go in there, they lift them up with forklifts just so they can stand for a second, and then they slaughter them. So then you're left with this crappy milk that has no calcium, nothing beneficial due to the pasteurization process. They add calcium in supplement form, which is very bio-unavailable. Then they tell us to drink milk for calcium. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Seriously. I'm sorry, but this is not real life. You don't have these nice grassy open fields overlooking rainbows where cows can wander around. That doesn't happen anymore. It's now in huge feeding lots, just shoving grain in their mouths. So let's look at this Swedish study that was done on 23,000 people. And what it did is they looked at 23,000 people who were lactose intolerant. And what they found was pretty interesting. First of all, lactose intolerant means that you can't digest the sugar in dairy, so they don't eat dairy. So what they found is that these 23,000 people who were lactose intolerant had significantly less incidences of cancer, allergies, bone fractures, irritable bowel syndrome. So if you can summarize this again, people who did not eat dairy had less incidences of cancer and bone fractures. You see, I want to make it a point that I'm strictly talking about commercial pasteurized milk here. I'm not talking about the raw, beneficial milk, but it makes up less than 1% of our supply, and the government is constantly putting these regulations on raw dairy farms that I don't even really mention it anymore because that's just not really relevant in today's society. So if we know that milk is absolutely toxic for us, why do we drink it in the first place? And the answer is marketing. I mean, can you look through 10 just normal magazines and not find a got milk ad? I can't. And kids are looking at this stuff too. So when you look at this, Wolverine drinks milk. I want to be a beast like Wolverine, okay? So I'm going to drink milk. she's attractive, she drinks milk, I should drink milk, right? I want to get buff like this guy, so I'm going to drink milk. He was a good president, right? Seems smart. You drank milk.
He only drank raw milk.
Oh. And Yoda, yes, if you want the wisdom of Yoda, you've got to drink milk, you know. So this is what's going on with our ads, you know. We're constantly bombarded with this. So the only beneficial calcium you can get is from vegetables. Have we ever seen a vegetable ad? I mean, the only slogan I literally know that promotes vegetables is Popeye and spinach, but they don't even use that anymore. That's literally the only thing I can think of, you know. So of course we're going to go for milk to get our calcium instead of spinach and vegetables. So here's a couple more dairy statistics, because I just really feel like hammering dairy today. Countries with the highest dairy consumption, Sweden, the UK, Finland, and the US, have by far the highest incidence of osteoporosis. It's not even close. Let's just look at the US alone. The state that eats the most dairy is the cheese state, Wisconsin, and they have by far the highest incidence of osteoporosis in this country. There is absolutely not one study that even shows drinking milk increases bone density, yet everyone does it. What there is studies on, though, is that getting your calcium from vegetables and not eating dairy gives you significantly less incidence of osteoporosis. It's significantly good in building bones. And all that research I just went over, all the references are all right here. So if you want to check out the YouTube channel, you can feel free to research all of this yourself and check it out. So if milk doesn't prevent osteoporosis, what causes it in the first place? And what it is osteoporosis is caused by a lack of exercise and a lack of laying calcium down in bone. It's not caused by a lack of calcium in bone. So when you talk about exercise, your bones need this tensile stress from gravity and exercise in order to stimulate new bone growth. I mean, is it logical for someone to sit down literally all day and expect to get healthy bones, even though they drink or eat a ton of vegetables? You still need to get that tensile force. Can you get big muscles without working out? Can someone sit on the couch all day, drink copious amounts of protein shakes, and expect to get big muscles? No, they need to have that stressor. So I generally recommend getting your food sources, or getting your nutrients from food sources, natural food sources. However, for women out there that want to get their nutrition from supplements, you have to make sure that you take calcium with vitamin D3, magnesium, and vitamin K2, because all four of those work synergistically. And you have to make sure that you're taking calcium that's bioavailable, like calcium citrate. And I don't know if many of you have heard of vitamin K2, but it's a fairly new researched supplement that they found. And its primary mechanism, what it does is it takes calcium from the areas in the body that it shouldn't be, such as your arteries and your soft tissues, and it puts the calcium in places it needs to be, like our bones. So it's very important. And by the way, just as a side note, statins for high cholesterol blocks K2 synthesis. So when you hear statins are linked to heart disease, it's because you get this calcific plaques in arteries leading to heart disease, because it's not able to remove that calcium and bring it to bones because it blocks K2. And that was just a recent study out there as well. So this lady comes in, 55 years old, couldn't walk 50 feet without pain. She was on Fosamax for the osteoporosis her doctor told her she had, and she was on anti-inflammatories for the severe pain she was in. What we did is we got her nervous system working better, we got her functioning better, and what do you know, 90 days later she's medication free and she's able to walk the length of a mall with no pain. I mean, pretty remarkable. And I think the best part about this, though, is that she reported that she got her life back. And that's awesome, and that's what we do every day in our office. So now that we went through osteoporosis and DEXA scans, now let's turn our attention to mammograms. The question I want to ask is, are mammograms safe and effective? First of all, if we're going to ask that, we have to find out what a mammogram actually is. And what it is an X-ray analysis of your breast tissue for the purpose of detecting cancer early to start treatment early. That's what mammograms are. Now, what they don't tell you is that a mammogram can elicit more than 1,000 times the amount of radiation in your breast tissue as would a normal chest x-ray. So, someone help me about this. Where's the wisdom in doing a cancer screening on someone that causes cancer to begin with? I mean, I literally don't get it. You see, everyone knows that ionizing radiation can cause cancer, and it's dose responsive, which means the more dose throughout your lifetime, the higher incidence. And they want you to do something that's 1,000 times more radiation than just a normal chest x-ray, and they want you to do it every single year. Are you kidding me? I mean, when you hear these stats about our healthcare system, it literally makes me want to pull my hair out. It's crazy. So there's countless studies on the inefficiency of mammograms, and I've had to narrow it down, which is very tough, but I've picked a couple that I think are the best. Harvard and Dartmouth did a study involving 16 million women. I did that because the subject size was the biggest that's ever been done. 16 million women over the course of 10 years. And who took mammograms every year. And what they found is that when you get mammograms every year, it does not increase your lifespan. In fact, another conclusion they came out with was that the risks outweigh the benefits. So you show someone these results, and how can someone say yes to this? I don't get it. And then what I like about this research is that it really just laid it out for us very clean. The Nordic Cochrane Center in Denmark came out with this. And what the study showed is that if you take 2,000 women who get annual mammograms for 10 years, one will be saved. One. So what that means is that they'll find that breast cancer at an earlier stage, she'll get the chemo and radiation, and her life will be saved. One will be saved. 200 will be falsely diagnosed. 200 will be falsely diagnosed with breast cancer, and 10 of those 200 will be falsely operated on. They'll actually have their breast tissue removed because they think they have breast cancer, later to find out they didn't have it. And not only do they get the breast tissue removed, think about the subsequent radiation and chemotherapy they're going to get as well, when they don't even have it in the first place. So one saved to 200 adverse events. And think about the psychological strain on these 200 women. I mean, you find out you have cancer, and sometimes it takes years for them to even just counteract their argument and say, oh, never mind, we were mistaken. You know, so they're gonna have anxiety, worry. You know, their relationships are totally destroyed with their family, everything. They become more vulnerable to the concept of disease, and they have a decreased sex drive. That's what happens. So it's huge, this psychological strain it does. So it's literally destroying lives every day. And another one of my favorite studies is the Swiss Medical Board finally came out in April 2014 saying they recommended putting a complete stop to mammograms altogether. Now that was a breakthrough research, you know, go Swiss, right? Now, in the article it was very interesting because I'm reading this and the author of the article kept on saying stuff like, when asking Dr. Coppens for his opinion, he was saying how this is all pseudoscience, how these anti-mammogram quacks, yada yada. I mean, he was just, this guy is super against this movement going on, and he just disregarded all the science behind it as pseudoscience. I'm thinking, man, who is this guy? So I looked him up, and he's the professor of radiology at Harvard. But that is not even the best part, because I've never seen this in an article, actually in a study, where the very bottom of the article, in little small italics that I don't think they want anyone to read, well, I read it, and it says this, at the conclusion of the study, it says that the Swiss Medical Board is independent with no financial relationships. Dr. Coppens receives financial support from GE Healthcare. But I don't even know what GE Healthcare is. So I just do what any logical person would do, I Google it, right? I Google GE Healthcare, and boom, GE Healthcare is the business that makes mammograms. So of course he's gonna call it pseudoscience, right? They're trying to ban the thing that he gets funded for. You know, that pays his bills. So of course he's gonna come in. I mean, shoot, if I was in this guy's position, I would say it's pseudoscience. You know, it's a good business strategy. So talk about a conflict of interest, I mean, really. So a better alternative would be thermography. Thermography is kind of like prevention, or not prevention, but early detection on steroids. Because you're detecting something before cancer can even exist. You're detecting an increased metabolic rate, increased inflammatory markers, and they do that by like this red that you're seeing on that breast. You can see some increased metabolism going on, increased heat, which shows that you got some type of process starting to begin with. So then if this woman got this, what they could do then is work towards preventing the cancer to being developed, because they know they're kind of starting at the precursors, you know. So that's a lot better alternative, completely toxic free. You know, it's not going to elicit 1,000 times more radiation than a chest x-ray, stuff like that. And here's all the references for the breast cancer research. Now, what causes breast cancer? Because this is very interesting. Is breast cancer a genetic illness? Well, let's look at what a genetic illness is. A genetic illness is the absence or presence of a gene that results in the disease 100% of the time. So if it was a genetic illness, if you had the breast cancer gene, you would have breast cancer 100% of the time. That's a true genetic illness. A true genetic illness is Down syndrome. If you have this third certain chromosome, I don't remember, you're going to have Down syndrome 100% of the time. Now, there's two determining factors. It's either the presence of the gene or it's the expression of a gene, because genes are always involved, but you got to look at why. Healthy lifestyle choices, because the expression of a gene is directly determined by your environment, your lifestyle. So if you have a healthy lifestyle and make healthy lifestyle choices, you're going to have a healthy genetic expression and you're going to be healthy. So what they found out is that thousands and thousands of women have the breast cancer gene and never get breast cancer and live long, happy lives. So from that fact alone, we know it's not a genetic illness. It's a genetic expression illness. And to make this point kind of clear, and I'm borrowing this analogy from Dr. Chestnut, let's say that researchers discovered the hangover gene, right? If you have this hangover gene, you get the most deadliest hangovers ever. But then you got to ask yourself a question. If you don't drink at all, if you don't have this lifestyle choice of being exposed to toxic alcohol, you don't get a hangover. Oh my gosh. So you're telling me that someone could have this hangover gene their entire life and never get a hangover, as long as they had proper lifestyle choices. Same thing with breast cancer. This exact same thing. And so, to wrap it up, there's just a couple more studies I just want to briefly go over. They now just changed smoking as the #1 risk factor for cancer. It's now obesity is the #1 risk factor for cancer. And 2/3 of Americans are overweight. So that basically says that 2/3 of Americans are at a high risk of cancer. And that just occurred literally yesterday, that new research right there. And then the agouti mouse study. Now, the agouti mice, what they found out is that, I think I'm saying that right, the agouti mice, they found that they had this agouti gene, and the species was like this nasty yellow, tumor-infested, diabetes, obese mice that they would get. And researchers were just so fascinated by this gene that's causing all of these agouti mice to happen. And one researcher came in and said, and actually he didn't say anything, he just changed one thing. And when he changed one thing to the pregnant agouti mice, they realized that the offspring came out normal, mousy brown, not obese, not diabetic, completely healthy. And seriously, the one thing he changed was the diet of the pregnant agouti mouse. They didn't make them work out, they didn't make them, do other things that you genetically require, just change the diet to a more genetically, adaptable diet to eat. So we know, again, this was not a genetic illness, this agouti. This was a genetic expression. It had to do with lifestyle factors. And then another cool, interesting thing is that they found out these agouti mice that had these huge tumors, once they changed their environment, they actually allowed them out of their cage to go run around, to meet with other mice, to have a better diet. They actually saw those tumors shrink and actually, in cases, being completely resorbed from the body, just by changing the lifestyle. You're not going to hear about this study out there because this directly goes against what we do. Why would we promote lifestyle? Where's the money in that? Let's do mammograms, let's do chemo, let's do all of this stuff here. So when we talk about lifestyle choices, you got to look at the 5 factors that are involved here. You have to have a proper nerve supply throughout your life. You got to be functioning at your optimum, and that's exactly what we do at our office. You got to get regular exercise, daily exercise. It's a genetic requirement. Remember, bones can't be healthy unless they're under force loads. You have to have proper nutrition. And that means limiting dairy, or better yet, no dairy. You have to have sufficient rest, and you have to have prayer and meditation. You see, at our office, what we do is we do exactly what our healthcare system does not pay for. And that's, we provide care that seeks to prevent disease, promote health, and prolong and enhance the quality of life. That's exactly what we do at our office. What I want each and every one of you is just to take action. I urge you to come in, get your health checked, but not only that, I want you to make you the doctor. Because once we put our health in someone else's control, we no longer have any input at all in our own lifestyle decisions.